At St. Elizabeth's Medical Center in Brighton, Massachusetts, the hospital ran out of bereavement boxes, the small cases used to carry the remains of a newborn who has died down to the morgue. 6 employees told the Boston Globe that staff carried those remains in bankers' boxes and shipping boxes instead, and that nurses bought proper containers online with their own money. In September 2024, a nurse from that hospital told a United States Senate committee the same thing under oath. The president of St. Elizabeth's told the Globe he was unaware of any situation where they lacked appropriate bereavement supplies. This story does not start in a courtroom. It starts in a supply cabinet. Because the money at Steward Health Care had not run out. It had left 8 years earlier in a single transaction. In September 2016, Steward sold the land and buildings under 9 of its hospitals for $1.25 billion. The buyer was a real estate investment trust in Birmingham, Alabama, called Medical Properties Trust. Steward did not move out. It signed a lease and stayed where it was. That is a sale-leaseback. A company sells a building it owns, takes the cash, then rents that same building back from the new owner. The cash arrives once. The rent arrives forever. Court documents would later put Steward's annual rent to that landlord and an affiliated company at $341 million a year. So the question is narrow. How does a hospital system with 31 hospitals and nearly 30,000 employees end up unable to buy a cardboard box? This is Collapse Ledger. We take companies apart at the ledger line, the transaction, the number, the date. Subscribe, because every video here does exactly that. In 2010, these hospitals belonged to Caritas Christi Health Care, a Catholic system in Massachusetts. It was failing, and it carried pension obligations it could not fund. On November 5, 2010, a private equity firm called Cerberus Capital Management closed a deal to buy it, valued at $895 million. $420 million of that was the buyout itself. The rest was assumed debt and pension liabilities. Bloomberg reported that Cerberus put up $246 million in cash. The cardiac surgeon who had run Caritas Christi, Ralph de la Torre, stayed on to run the new for-profit company, and it was named Steward Health Care. Massachusetts attached conditions, at least $400 million into hospital infrastructure over 4 years, and a 5-year monitoring period. Hold that monitoring period. 5 years, starting in 2010. Note when it expires. The deal closed on October 3, 2016, 1 year after the monitoring period ran out. The terms come from the landlord's own filing with the Securities and Exchange Commission. A 15-year initial lease running to October 31, 2031 with 3 5-year extensions. An accounting yield of 10.1%, escalators tied to inflation. The master lease and the mortgage loans cross-defaulted, backed by a corporate guarantee. Read that the way a lender reads it. The yield does not fall when patient volumes fall. The escalator does not pause in a bad year. There are 2 honest readings of that transaction, and a fair history holds both. The first is Steward's own. The company has said it used roughly $400 million to retire debt and more than $400 million on hospital upgrades. A system carrying inherited pension liabilities needed capital it could not raise cheaply against its own credit, and the real estate was the only asset large enough to solve the problem. Other hospital systems have done exactly this and survived. The second reading comes from Cerberus. In April 2024, answering questions from United States senators, Cerberus confirmed that its fund invested no additional capital in Steward's hospitals between the 2016 sale-leaseback and its exit in 2020, and that capital improvements between 2010 and 2016 were funded out of Steward's own balance sheet or from borrowing. Not from Cerberus. Both can be true at once. Money did go into the hospitals. It just did not come from the owner. It came from the sale of the ground underneath them. September 12, 2024. A Senate hearing room, a name tag on the table, and behind the name tag, an empty chair. The Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee had voted to subpoena Steward's chief executive. It was the first subpoena that committee had issued since 1981. Ralph de la Torre did not appear. Nurses testified in his place. And the question in that room was whether one executive had been greedy. That is the wrong question. The rent was contractual. It was owed in good quarters and bad ones, whether the hospitals were full or empty, escalating on a fixed schedule for 15 years. Greed is a motive. A lease is an obligation. Only one of them appears on a balance sheet. The chair was empty. The lease was not. Now the latter, one date at a time. May 2020. Cerberus begins its exit, transferring its 90% stake to a group of Steward physicians led by De La Torre in exchange for a $350 million promissory note. The Boston Globe reported the firm ultimately left with roughly $800 million in profit. January 2021. Steward distributed $111 million to its new owners. The estate's complaint, filed in the Southern District of Texas, alleges that De La Torre personally received $81.5 million of that distribution, and that when it was paid, Steward's liabilities already exceeded its assets by more than $1.5 billion. The complaint alleges part of that money went into a superyacht. A spokesperson for De La Torre has said that he disputes the allegations of wrongdoing and will vigorously defend himself against them. The rent stops arriving in full. In the fourth quarter, Steward pays $16 million against $70 million owed in rent and interest. May 6, 2024. Steward Health Care files for Chapter 11 in the United States Bankruptcy Court for the Southern District of Texas with more than $9 billion in liabilities. $6.6 billion of that, running out to the year 2041, is rent. August 31st, 2024. Kearney Hospital in Dorchester and Neshoba Valley Medical Center in Ayer closed their doors. No qualified bids. Here is the version of this story you have probably already heard. Private equity bought hospitals, stripped them, and the hospitals died. Two facts break it. Cerberus was gone 3 years before the filing, and most of the 31 hospitals did not die. On October 31st, 2024, 5 Massachusetts hospitals transitioned to new operators: Boston Medical Center, Brown University Health, and Lawrence General. They are open today. The landlord that collected the rent is not accused of anything. That is not a crime. That is a lease performing exactly as it was written. What actually happened is narrower and worse. Steward sold the one asset it could never buy back. The buildings were sold, the cash left, and the rent stayed. Rent is not a bad quarter. Rent is a contract that outlives every person who signed it. Which brings us back to the supply cabinet. At one Steward Hospital cafeteria, the coffee vendor came and repossessed the coffee pots. That is not dramatic. That is what a balance sheet looks like from the floor, and the ledger is still open. On July 30th, 2026, Cerberus settled with the creditors' trust. It continues to deny any wrongdoing, and the dollar figure was redacted from the court filings and remains under seal. On July 31st, 2026, a federal appeals court in Washington rejected De La Torre's attempt to sue the senators who referred him, calling his arguments wholly meritless. And on August 6, 2026, the Boston Globe reported that the leaders of that Senate committee had written to the acting attorney general asking why nothing had happened yet. The Senate referred De La Torre for criminal contempt in September 2024. A referral is not a charge. As of this recording, no charges have been filed against him. If you worked in a Steward hospital, tell us 3 things in the comments. Which hospital, what year, and what ran out first. The people who worked those floors know more than the people who structured the deal. Subscribe, because the next one is the mirror image of this one. Steward sold buildings it genuinely owned and could never buy back. The next company pledged the same collateral twice. It sold what it never had the right to sell once. Opposite error. Identical ending.